name is Jerron Smith. 20 years ago, I moved to Washington, D.C. to attend Howard University. I was at a crossroads, just like America is today. I grew up on Strand Hill Road in Cleveland, a blue-collar street in a blue-collar city. When the media talks about forgotten places or working-class people who are overlooked and struggling hard, there's usually some stock photo of people who don't look like me. They never seem to show people like my mom, who worked 2 jobs as a gas station clerk, and a mom. She showed me how to persevere. They never seem to show people like my dad, who plowed snow in the winter and paved streets in the summer, who stood by me through thick and thin and taught me strong values every day. They never seem to show people like me. At first, I didn't live the values my parents taught me. I won a starting spot on the varsity football team, but I only had a 1.9 GPA. But then I broke my leg. It took a broken leg for me to really get moving in life. I prioritized schoolwork, went to Howard, and ended up working for the President of the United States. Growing up, I'd never really known a Republican. I believed all the stereotypes. It took a meeting Republicans who shared my values to show me I was wrong. Donald Trump knows that in the work of revitalizing communities, America's strength is America's people. And I can tell you, he really cares, and he takes action. Every issue important to Black communities has been a priority for him. Prison reform, rebuilding broken families, bringing jobs back to America. Jobs in Cleveland, jobs in Detroit, jobs in Milwaukee. President Trump knows that education is the great equalizer. That's why he secured record and permanent funding for historically Black colleges and universities, and is fighting hard for school choice. In the wake of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and legend Taliaferro, a moment of national racial consciousness, I have seen his true conscience. I just wish everyone could see the deep empathy he shows to families whose loved ones were killed in senseless violence. President Trump has made it clear that if you want safe communities, you must have police departments with the highest standards. I'll never forget Strand Hill Road or the people of Cleveland. They're tough, smart, and tell it like it is. That's President Trump. For a New Yorker, he's got a lot of Cleveland heart. And I'm proud to say that he's my president. God bless America.
My name is Stacia Brightman. I'm a single mother of 2 boys, and I work in Houston, Texas for S&B Engineers and Constructors as a warehouse receiving clerk. After serving my country in the Marine Corps, I worked various jobs, but I thought I needed a degree in order to have a career. I put myself into significant debt to earn my bachelor's degree in finance. Despite my degree and all of my efforts, at one point, my boys and I even found ourselves homeless. After being laid off yet again, I received an email from the Texas Workforce Commission about S&B's Women in Construction Earn While You Learn apprenticeship program. I thought I'd give it a try. I was a bit skeptical at first, but I said to myself, hey, if they're willing to take a chance on me, I should be willing to take a chance on myself. At the start of the program, I was making $16 an hour while I trained to become a pipe fitter helper. Looking back, it wasn't easy, but boy, was it worth it. I felt empowered that I was learning new skills and able to support my family again. I worked hard, got promoted, and even got a few raises. Later, I learned what President Donald Trump and Ivanka Trump were doing behind the scenes to make sure that people like me and you had a chance to rise up and succeed. President Trump started the National Council for the American Worker and the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. Together with Ivanka, he wrote policies that made it easy for states and companies to give opportunities to hardworking Americans like me. The President and Ivanka also partnered with the Ad Council to launch findsomethingnew.org, helping to connect workers and workers with training and apprenticeship programs where they live. If you find yourself in a situation like mine, where you feel you have nowhere to turn, nothing to really fall back on, and you feel like no one believes in you, go online to findsomethingnew.org and see that President Trump believes in you. And more importantly, please believe in yourself. Keep trying, keep pushing. Times will get hard. Remember, just a few years ago, I was homeless. And you know what now? I'm set to close on a brand new home at the end of the month. So my message to you is keep pushing. You can do it. Find a training program like the one I participated in. And like me, you'll have an opportunity to build a career in life that you're proud of. So with that being said, I'd like to talk to you about a different kind of training. This is the Trump campaign's National Week of Volunteer Training. If you're like me, you know how important it is to put Americans back to work. So get trained and get involved with the campaign. Go online to www.trumpvictory.com and sign up and keep the president fighting for you for another 4 years. Thank you and God bless.
I'm Jack Brewer, a former 3-time NFL team captain, college professor, coach, husband, son, and father. I'm also a lifelong Democrat, but I support Donald Trump. Let me be clear. I didn't come here for the popularity or the praise, the likes or the retweets. I'm here as a servant to God, a servant to the people of our nation, and a servant to our president. I grew up in Grapevine, Texas, a town that my great-grandfather was the first black man to settle as a sharecropper in 1896. My early high school experience included fighting with skinheads and being a witness in an attempted murder trial after my friend shot a skinhead in self-defense. I remember my dad's bravery when he personally stood up against a KKK rally in my town. In my house, my father taught me to back down from no one. I know what racism looks like. I've seen it firsthand. In America, it has no resemblance to President Trump. And I'm fed up with the way he's portrayed in the media, who refuse to acknowledge what he's actually done for the black community. It's confusing the minds of our innocent children. Before I left to come deliver this message, my energetic 8-year-old son, Jackson, stopped me and said, "Dad, can you please just tell everyone that all lives need to matter and that God loves everyone?" In that moment, I realized that my 8-year-old had figured out what so many adults have seemed to forget. We are not as divided as our politics suggest. At some point, for the sake of our children, the policies must take priority over the personalities. So because you have an issue with President Trump's tone, you're going to allow Biden and Harris to deny our underserved black and brown children school choice? Are we so offended by the president's campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," that we're going to ignore that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have collectively been responsible for locking up countless black men for nonviolent crimes? Are you going to allow the media to lie to you by falsely claiming that he said there were very fine white supremacists in Charlottesville? He didn't say that. It's a lie. And ignore the so-called Black Lives Matter organization that openly, on their website, calls for the destruction of the nuclear family. My fellow Americans, our families need each other. We need black fathers in the homes with their wives and children. The future of our communities depend on it. I'm blessed to be able to run inner city youth programs and to also teach in prisons across America. The inmates in my federal prison program literally receive days off their sentence just for attending my class. And that's thanks to President Donald Trump and his First Step Act. President Trump cared about these Americans and their families, even when so many others had left them behind and had written them off. I'm forever grateful for President Trump for that. He endures relentless attacks, and so do many of us, like myself, who support him. But my mama always told me, when the Lord starts blessing, the devil starts messing. This convention marks a time to celebrate our history. Republicans are the party that freed the slaves and the party that put the first black men and women in Congress. It's the party of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And now, Tim Scott and Donald Trump. Our president has made incredible strides to end mass incarceration and give unprecedented opportunities for black in America to rise. America, let this election be a call for all God's people who are called by his name to humble ourselves and pray together and to seek his face and to turn from our wicked ways. Then he will hear us from heaven and he will forgive our sins and he will heal our land. Amen. And God bless America.
Good evening. I'm Senator Tim Scott from the great state of South Carolina. To all of you tuning in and participating in the political process, God bless you. This isn't how I picture tonight, but our country is experiencing something none of us envisioned. From a global pandemic to the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, 2020 has tested our nation in ways we haven't seen for decades. But regardless of the challenges presented to us, every 4 years, Americans come together to vote, to share stories of what makes our nation strong and the lessons we have learned that can strengthen it for further generations. Because while this election is between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, it is not solely about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It's about the promise of America. It's about you and me, our challenges and heartbreaks, hopes and dreams. It's about how we respond when tackling critical issues like police reform, when Democrats called our work a token effort and walked out of the room during negotiations because they wanted the issue more than they wanted a solution. Do we want a society that breeds success or a culture that cancels everything it even slightly disagrees with? I know where I stand. Because you see, I am living my mother's American dream. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old, and we moved in with my grandparents into a 2-bedroom home with me, my mom, and my brother sharing a room and one bed. My mom worked 16 hours a day to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. She knew that if we could find the opportunity, bigger things would come. I thought I had to use football to succeed in life, and my focus on academics faded away. My freshman year, I failed out. I failed 4 subjects: Spanish, English, world geography, and even civics. Trust me, though, after 7 years in the Senate, I know I'm not the only one in Congress who failed civics. But even while I was failing the 9th grade, my mother always said to me, "Timmy, if you would just shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll be among the stars." She never lost faith in me, even when I lost faith in myself. Because of her encouragement, I went to summer school and caught up. The next year, I met my mentor, John Moniz, a Chick-fil-A operator. John saw something in me that I could not see in myself and started teaching me valuable life lessons. Like having a job would be a good thing, but creating jobs would be even better. That having an income could change my lifestyle, but creating a profit could change my community. He planted the seeds of what would become Opportunity Zones. This initiative that the President and I worked together on is now bringing more than $75 billion of private sector investment into distressed communities. I took those lessons to heart and started putting the pieces of my life back together. I realized a quality education is the closest thing to magic in America. That's why I fight to this day for school choice, to make sure every child in every neighborhood has a quality education. I don't care if it's a public, private, charter, virtual, or a homeschool. When a parent has a choice, their kid has a better chance. And the president has fought alongside me on that. Later in life, I started my own small business. That's why I know it is critical for us to have a tax code that encourages growth. We actually saw revenues to the Treasury increase after we lowered taxes in 2017. Rest assured, the Democrats do not want you to know that. After starting my small business and spending some time in local government, I decided to run for Congress in 2010. The district is based in Charleston, South Carolina, where the Civil War started, against a son of our legendary Senator, Strom Thurmond. You may be asking yourself, how does a poor black kid from a single-parent household run and win in a race crowded with Republicans against a Thurmond? Because of the evolution of the Southern heart. In an overwhelmingly white district, the voters judged me not on the color of my skin, but on the content of my character. We live in a world that only wants you to believe in the bad news, racially, economically, and culturally polarizing news. The truth is, our nation's arc always bends back towards fairness. We are not fully where we want to be, but I thank God Almighty, we are not where we used to be. We are always striving to be better. When we stumble, and we will, we pick ourselves back up and try again. We don't give in to cancel culture or the radical and factually baseless belief that things are worse today than in the 1860s or the 1960s. We have work to do, but I believe in the goodness of America, the promise that all men and all women are created equal. And if you're watching tonight, I'm betting you do too. Over the past 4 years, we have made tremendous progress towards that promise. President Trump built the most inclusive economy ever. 7 million jobs created pre-COVID-19, and 2/3 of them went to women, African Americans, and Hispanics. The first new major effort to tackle poverty in a generation, opportunity zones. We put hard-earned tax dollars back in people's pockets by cutting their taxes, especially for single-parent households like the one I grew up in, cutting single mothers' taxes 70% on average. President Trump supported these tax cuts for those single moms and other working families and signed these policies into law, and our nation is better off for it. So, I'm going to ask you, the American people, not to simply look at what the candidates say, but to look back at what they've done. This election is about your future, and it is critical to paint a full picture of the records of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden said if a black man didn't vote for him, he wasn't truly black. Joe Biden said black people are a monolithic community. It was Joe Biden who said poor kids can be just as smart as white kids. And while his words are one thing, his actions take it to a whole new level. In 1994, Biden led the charge on a crime bill that put millions of black Americans behind bars. President Trump's criminal justice reform law fixed many of the disparities Biden created and made our system more fair and just for all Americans. Joe Biden also failed our nation's historically black colleges and universities, heaping blame on them as they fought to ensure our young folks had access to higher education. Once again, to clean up Joe Biden's mess, President Trump signed into law historically high funding for HBCUs, as well as a bill to give them permanent funding for the first time ever. And now Joe Biden wants to come for your pocketbooks. Unless, of course, you're a blue state millionaire. I'm serious. That's one of their solutions for the pandemic. They want to take more money from your pocket and give it to Manhattan elites and Hollywood moguls so they get a tax break. Republicans, however, passed President Trump's once-in-a-generation tax reform bill that lowered taxes for single moms, working families, and those in need. So when it comes to what Joe Biden says he'll do, look at his actions. Look at his policies. Look at what he already did and what he didn't do while he's been in Washington for 47 years. Ladies and gentlemen, people don't always see those failures because they think we're having a policy debate on two sides of an issue. That is not what is happening. Our side is working on policy, while Joe Biden's radical Democrats are trying to permanently transform what it means to be an American. Make no mistake, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want a cultural revolution, a fundamentally different America. If we let them, they will turn our country into a socialist utopia. And history has taught us that path only leads to pain and misery, especially for hardworking people hoping to rise. Instead, we must focus on the promise of the American journey. I know that journey well. My grandfather's 99th birthday would have been tomorrow. Growing up, he had to cross the street if a white person was coming. He suffered the indignity of being forced out of school as a third grader to pick cotton, and he never learned to read or write. Yet, he lived long enough to see his grandson become the first African American to be elected to both the United States House and the United States Senate in the history of this country. Our family went from cotton to Congress in one lifetime. And that's why I believe the next American century can be better than the last. There are millions of families just like mine all across this nation, full of potential, seeking to live the American dream. And I'm here tonight to tell you that supporting the Republican ticket gives you the best chance of making that dream a reality. God bless you. And Father, please continue blessing the United States of America. God bless.
Hello, my name is Ann Dorn. I'd like to introduce you to my husband, David, father of 5, brother of 12, grandfather of 10, friend to thousands. He was the most kind, dedicated, loving life partner I could have hoped for. He had a big smile and a heart to match. He was blessed with the gift of gab, and that gift enabled him to touch souls and inspire people, especially young people. Oh, how kids loved him, and they really loved him back. Dave was all about service. He served 38 years in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department and 6 years as chief of police as the Moline Acres Police Department. After 44 years, he retired from law enforcement, but he never retired from helping a friend in need. Since he befriended every person he met, he was a very busy man. One example of that was his friendship with a young man named Lee. David met him when Lee was just a kid, after members of his family were attacked and murdered. Dave took a special interest in the boy. They bonded, and their friendship grew and remained strong throughout the years. Lee eventually opened a pawn shop. He trusted Dave implicitly and asked Dave to help with security. David readily agreed. Whenever the shop's alarm would go off, the alarm company called Dave. He would investigate. If he got a call after I went to bed, he would wake me up and tell me he was going to Lee's. just to make sure everything was all right. Most of the time they were false alarms, triggered by a storm or animals. But I never rested easily until I heard Dave's key turn in the door, knowing he was home safe. The alarm that went off the morning of June 2nd was for real. It was a violent night in St. Louis. 4 officers were shot. Others were hit with rocks and fireworks. At least 5 businesses were damaged, looted, or set on fire. As the Officer Wellness Coordinator and CIT Coordinator with the police department, I was keenly aware of the rioting and spent the evening getting ready to mobilize support for officers who were impacted. After I'd gone to bed, David received a call from Lee's Alarm Company. The front door of the pawn shop had been breached. This time he didn't wake me up to tell me. He probably knew I would have tried to stop him or insist on going with him. As I slept, looters were ransacking the shop. They shot and killed David in cold blood, and then live streamed his execution and his last moments on earth. David's grandson was watching the video on Facebook in real time, not realizing he was watching his own grandfather dying on the sidewalk. I learned of all this around 4 a.m. when our doorbell rang. The chief of police was standing outside. I wondered why Dave had not answered the door. It wasn't uncommon for him to be up watching TV at this time. I called out to him several times. There was no reply. He just wasn't there. I let in the chief, and fighting back tears, he uttered the words every officer's spouse dreads. I relive that horror in my mind every single day. My hope is that having you relive it with me now will help shake this country from this nightmare we are witnessing in our cities and bring about positive, peaceful change. How do we get to this point where so many young people are callous and indifferent towards human life? This isn't a video game where you can commit mayhem and then just hit reset and bring all the characters back to life. David is never coming back to me. He was murdered by people who didn't know and just didn't care. He would have done anything to help them. Violence and destruction are not legitimate forms of protest. They do not safeguard Black lives. They only destroy them. President Trump understands this, has offered federal help to restore order in our communities. In a time when police departments are short on resources and manpower, we need that help. We should accept that help. We must heal before we can effect change, but we cannot heal amid devastation and chaos. President Trump knows we need more Davids in our communities, not fewer. We need to come together in peace and remember that every life is precious.
Do you have anything to say, Ms. Jackson, to the politicians who are out there, or anything you want to say? To the presidents or the candidates, or to Trump or Biden or anything like that?
For our President Trump, first I want to say a family member, and I don't know if it was heard or not, said something that was not kind. She is hurting, and I do apologize for that. Our outburst that does not reflect our behavior. And then also for President Trump, I'm sorry I missed your call, because had I not missed your call, maybe the comments that you made would have been different. And I'm not mad at you at all. I have most respect for you as the leader of our country. like I said before, and I'm not saying this to him directly, we should always get the details from the right source before we start throwing bricks.
What I want to talk about today is why I left the left. So, if you've seen any of my interviews, you would know that I used to be a Democrat. And a lot of people wonder why. Like, isn't it a big 180 to go from supporting Bernie Sanders to supporting Trump? And the answer is simply no. And the reason why is because a lot of people don't understand how it works. I grew up in the black community. I grew up in what's considered to be black culture. I went to public school all of my life. And that's just how I grew up. And the one thing that's consistent in the majority of cases is we grow up being taught we have to be Democrat. It's literally a default setting. There's no not being a Democrat. It's simply a default setting for black people to grow up and be Democrats in the black community and in black culture. And anybody from the black community will tell you that. So it's generational. So when it's generational, the hardest thing to do is break that mental curse. So the question is how to break the mental curse. And how I did it personally is I used to be a liberal. I used to consider myself super pro-black, Marcus Garvey, all this, Black Panther, blah, blah, blah. Because how I was taught. My grandmother was a Black Panther, right? And I was taught I was oppressed. I was taught we were victims. I was taught we didn't get treated the same. I was taught we didn't have all of our rights. So as a Bernie supporter, the reason I supported Bernie, I didn't know nothing about politics. Nothing. The reason I supported Bernie is because he yelled, he sounded good, and he always catered to, he always talked about racism and this and this and this. And as a person who was taught that racism was real, I felt like, oh man, yeah, he knows, I used to argue with my daddy all the time because he was a Hillary supporter. He used to say Bernie was crazy, but in my mind, I'm like, no, he's loud, he's rowdy, this and this. And then I started arguing with people online. I used to argue with Republicans online, right? About, Bernie Sanders. And I always found myself attacking other people that were Republicans. And if you were black, you was Republican. Where I'm from, all the same names they call me now is what I used to call people. Coon, Uncle Tom, things of that nature. But I started realizing I didn't like doing that. Like, why couldn't I just continue? Why couldn't I stay on topic? So I said, you know what? I'm about to research. My whole purpose of researching was to out-argue Republicans online, right? But as I was researching, I'm like, because first I'm looking up, I'm on Bernie Sanders' website, looking up what he believes in, and off the rip socially, I didn't agree with nothing. Literally not one thing. Because I grew up in the church, about this church, and a lot of stuff like that goes on now, we're not with. I never was with that. And I used to argue with the LGBT community online, even while I identified as a Democrat. So I'm looking up what Bernie Sanders is for, and I'm like, yo, I'm not with none of that. I don't agree with any of this. What are we talking about? The only thing I felt like I agreed with at the time was his, pro-black stances, but every single thing socially other than that, I was like, y'all don't agree with this. So I said, well, let me go to the economic side. My parents owned a beer store, and I was helping them run the beer store. So I know what it takes to start a business. I know what it takes to open a business. I know what these things take. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I always wanted to start things from scratch. So that's what looking at what he believed, economically, and it's almost like he hated rich people. It's like he was jealous of rich people. He just hated them. And then I'm like, hold on. I don't agree with any of this. I just simply don't agree. This is not how I was raised. These are not my values. So then I started looking up a few of the Republican candidates' platforms, right? I started with Ted Cruz. I'm like, now I align more with this because I like guns. You know what I'm saying? I'm confused. So I'm researching, I'm looking. And then I started watching the primaries. And Trump is just so entertaining. You can't take your eyes off of him. And as a person that grew up in a black community, and I was a rapper, a popular one in North Carolina, I was performing at HBCUs and everything. As a person that come from that, I've never disliked Trump. I've never called Trump a racist. Trump was a part of culture. Trump was a positive part of culture. We all wanted to be like Trump. So of course I'm watching Trump like, this is cool, And he wasn't politically correct. He just talked like a regular human being. He wasn't trying to really impress nobody. He was just trying to tell you what he believed in. And I feel like he was speaking to me and for me. And I don't know if y'all remember, but I don't know if it was a 100-day plan or like a 100 policy point plan. I don't remember, but I remember I read it. I read the whole thing, and I was like, I literally agree with like 85% of this, right? I started talking to my parents and telling them this, and they was like, no. My parents, like one day I'm going to have my dad and my mom on my podcast so they can tell y'all the type of arguments we would get in when I started realizing this. I didn't really go out, publicly yet with liking Trump. But, man, my parents, disagree with me, but I'm like, no, this is how I was raised. This is how y'all raised me for the most part, so this is what I believe. So I started posting, some of my conservative values on Facebook, and people were just like, Bryson, what are you doing? What are you turning into? So people started like going in on me. It used to be like it was like 20 people versus only me on my Facebook comments, because I've never been pro-choice. I've never been pro-choice. Never. You know what I'm saying? I've always been super religious, so it's like, I don't understand how, as a black person that grew up in a Baptist church, how we align with the left at all. So, I kept arguing with my parents. I kept, talking about my conservative values online, abortion, economics, and things of that nature. And I started becoming hated. I started becoming real controversial in my local area on Facebook. Then I bought a Trump hat. A regular Trump hat, right? And I took it home. I'm telling everybody I support Trump. I don't even care at this point. People already hate me, so hate me more. I support Trump. People started sending me articles of people getting beat up for wearing a Trump hat and saying that's going to be me next. People started sending me threats in my DMs that if I see you in the MAGA hat, this is going to happen. So I saw a video because I used to just hunt for other, black conservatives, like that was Trump supporters to watch. So I found King Face, I found Osig, I found Mikhail Crump, I found Candace Owens, Brandon Tatum. I'm like, okay, yeah. So King Face had this video with this big MAGA hat. He was like, do I look like somebody you can slap to somebody else? I'm like, I bought it instantly. Then I told everybody, this is how I'm coming. I support Trump, period. I started daring people for me to go places with the big MAGA hat on. They used to tell me to go, I bet you want to go to the mall Saturday night prime time. So I would go to the mall with the big MAGA hat on and just do it. Because at this point, people already hated me for my conservative values. So now I'm a Trump supporter. And now I'm going hard for Trump for the simple reason that you think you can stop me from liking somebody. You know what I'm saying? So I red pill myself by wanting to win arguments against Republicans. And what I ended up finding out is I align more with the Republican Party. And it's just simple. But I'm going to be honest, the GOP sucks with marketing. If you want to reach people like me, it's not going to be with a person that wears suits all the time, that talks politically correct and never uses slang when nothing is wrong with that. I mean, if you want to reach people like me and people from where I grew up from, that's not going to cut it. You need people like me. You need people like Kingfish. You need people like Brandon Tatum. We can really change the world right now. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like we a few steps behind where we should be, even though we're making ground. But I red pilled myself, and that's my story of why I left the left. And how I became a Trump supporter. And it was all out of curiosity and just doing my own research. So if any of you experience this or you know somebody that could benefit from watching this, please share it. And like I said, there's ways to support me below. But my name is Bryson Gray. This is why I left the left. Thank you for watching. Gang.
So, over the last 4 days, the Democratic National Party held a convention. A lot of people, you know what I mean, getting up there and talking, and, you know, everybody really, you know, eating it up, you know, throwing their hands in the air like they just don't care damn near. So it's you know, what I didn't hear is what's in it for us? What's in it for the black community besides the same old thing we've been getting from these parties? What's in it for us, for real? You know, I didn't hear anybody mention a contract with Black America. And I don't know why, because it's one of the most comprehensive reform documents that's come about in a long time that could really address the problem. The way it look, they don't have a plan. Everybody's, you know, talking about get Trump out, get Trump out, get Trump out. If you vote, that's going to happen on the first day. So now what? Trump out, now what? What? What do we get in the first 100 days? That's what we're trying to figure out. What do we actually get that they could give us overnight like that?
Wow. Remarkable. A contract with Black America. Interesting. What do we get in the first 100 days? Yes, we get them out of office. Okay. And then what? Remarkable that he would make these types of statements. They state here that instead of providing any policy proposals, the Democrats are focused on ousting President Donald Trump, and people are beginning to realize it.
When I watch the news in Seattle, Chicago, Portland, and other cities, when I see the history being rewritten, when I hear the promises, I've heard echoes of the former life I never wanted to hear again. I see shadows I thought I had outrun. My parents only wanted one person to decide my fate, me. Not some party member, not some government official, not some bureaucrat. In America, I would decide my own future. I am so grateful to America, the place where I was able to build my American dream through hard work and determination. President Trump knows that the American story was written by people just like you and I, who love our country and take risks to build a future for our families and neighbors. I may be a Cuban-born, but I am 100% American. This is the greatest country in the world. And I said this before, if I gave away everything that I have today, it would not equal 1% of what I was given when I came to this great country of ours. The gift of freedom. Right now, it is up to us to decide our fate and to choose freedom over oppression. President Trump, he's fighting the forces of anarchy and communism. And I know he will continue to do just that. And what about his opponent and the rest of the DC swamp? I have no doubt they will hand the country over to those dangerous forces. You and I will decide. And here's what I've decided. My decision is very easy. I choose President Trump because I choose America. I choose freedom. I still hear my dad. There is no other place to go. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless America.